I've loved music my entire life, as long as I can remember. Starting, of course, with music that was in my home, which would have been a combination of what's called sacred music or church music and then classical music. These were two forms of music that were considered acceptable in my home upbringing, for lack of a better word. My exposure to contemporary music, pop music, rock and roll, or whatever, didn't really begin creeping into my life until I got away from home in my teens. My mother was more tolerant of new forms of music, contemporary, some jazz and all that, and she enjoyed that stuff. My father never really got into it, never found that compelling. There might have been a moral component to part of it, which I'll go into later, but he just never resonated with music that much that was not either classical or sacred music. Having said that, back in the 60s and 70s, there was an overtone of morality based not so much on music, but on the artist. The ability to enjoy art of any kind for its own sake was colored by the perceived moral character of the artist as defined by that culture. This could lead to a very narrow window with which to enjoy secular music, and I was very glad to leave that behind. Fact is, I didn't just love music, but I was also musically talented. That means I could play the piano and I could sing. I played piano by ear. I was pretty good at it. I had piano teachers to teach me how to sight read piano music, but that never went very well. I don't know if it was an attention problem, learning disorder, what was going on, but whatever, I never really learned how to sit down and just read through a music score. Also, finding a music teacher or piano teacher that really resonated with me and I could stick with them for a few years long enough to get a good learning history was impossible because we moved every 2 to 3 years. When I think about it, I'm not sure why my mother didn't really teach me to do that because she could sit down and play and read music. So I don't really know what was going on there. Unfortunately, she's not here now, so I can't have that talk with her. To this day, piano music of all kinds, no matter the genre, is my favorite kind of music. That and singers and choral music. I took voice in high school and college. I took choir, which I really liked. We did a lot of serious choral music versus popular music covers, which we never did. We did some really good work back then in college. We were good enough that we could start from scratch, learning new music and do a concert in just a few weeks. We could do concerts with a whole brass choir and a huge pipe organ. That was something that I'll never forget. My primary musical foundation was largely classical music. I remember we had these things called community colleges, or I know community concerts actually, that I went to when I was pretty young in Montana. These were top tier classical performers that just traveled around and did these small concerts. The goal was to bring world class talent to smaller cities and towns that couldn't support a permanent symphony or an opera company. But that's where I got my exposure to what experiencing professional music in a hall or venue came from. When I got into my late teens and 20s, is when I started listening more to rock and roll and jazz and some rhythm and blues and country and new age and much more. This is when I began to develop an eclectic style in music to the extent where today very little music that I don't enjoy. Music is very subjective, of course, depending on how you grew up, what you listen to in your household, what's going on in your life at the time, whether or not something moves you to tears or doesn't really move you at all. Music serves many purposes that serve to support you emotionally at a deeper level, or just to be background music, or just be something that makes you feel good. It's kind of funny when I think about it, what it was like growing up, because later in life I met people in music who are famous, people in rock and roll. I found out how nice they are, how everyone grew up and got older, left the drug, sex, and rock and roll part behind, and now it's just about the rock and roll. Now it's just about the music. Almost like people I went to high school with, just famous people. But, laughing and telling jokes and loving music, and who knew? People who love music, who love making music, they're kind of all the same. It doesn't matter whether it's somebody you sang in choir with when you're in high school or a professional. It's kind of the same vibe. It's the same personality thing. It's stuff you get to talk about and enjoy. And there's something about knowing people who are well known you're backstage before a show and you're chatting or telling jokes or doing whatever, and then the show starts and you're sitting back out with the audience and you're looking up at the stage and going, "Oh yeah, they're those guys." Anyway, so for me, music has been an interesting journey, really, in many respects. I don't know if I've explained it very well at this point, but there's a lot to be said for where music is right now, technologically speaking, how things are changing, and there's a lot of stuff to talk about. The democratization of being able to make music, not in the studio, but at home, how AI is influencing what people are doing, what's happening to album sales and where the money in music is now versus where it used to be. There's a lot to talk about. I've written articles about it, and I'll probably go more in detail later on. But for now, this is where it started for me.